The giant alien woman moved carefully through the abandoned mining valley, trying not to break anything beneath her feet. She was 10 feet tall, broad-shouldered, heavy-framed, and shaped in a way her own species often mocked. Her name was Lyra Ven, but most people called her something else behind her back. Mountain, monster. Mistake. She tried not to hear those words, but they followed her everywhere. Her size was not rare among her people, but her appearance made her stand out even more. Her ridged arms, her strong jaw, her heavy steps, all of it created the same reaction. Fear first, judgment second. She had come to this valley because it was empty. The mines had closed long ago, leaving behind metal skeletons of cranes and towers. She liked this place because no one stared at her here. She could walk freely without worrying that her shadow would frighten a child or that her voice would cause someone to flinch. She could breathe without feeling like the air wasn't meant for her. But she still carried one problem. Her heart hurt from the words she tried to ignore. She sat on the edge of a ruined transport crate, curling her legs up so she took less space. She liked making herself smaller. It didn't work, but she tried anyway. As she looked out across the empty valley, she repeated the same thought she always had. She wished she was normal. She wished she was small. She wished she did not look like someone built for war. She wished she did not remind others of the old legends of beasts and mountain spirits. She wished she belonged somewhere. She didn't know that on this same day, a human ship was crossing low altitude above the valley. The ship was not large, only a personal transport meant for one pilot and cargo. It belonged to a human named Ezra Cole, a supply runner who took odd jobs across frontier planets. Ezra wasn't rich, but he was skilled enough to keep himself flying. What he did not expect was a sudden engine flare, a burst of smoke, and flashing warning lights. The ship shook violently. Ezra grabbed the controls, fighting to keep it steady. The ship was failing. Not fast, but fast enough that he needed to land immediately. He scanned the area below and spotted the abandoned valley. It looked quiet and flat enough to make a landing. He guided the ship down, struggling to keep it level. The moment the landing gear touched the ground, one of the engines gave out completely. The ship slammed down, harder than planned. Sparks flew from the side panel. The ground trembled from the impact. Lyra Ven's head snapped up. She felt the vibration through the soil before she heard the crash. Her heart raced. A ship had gone down close by. For a moment she wondered whether she should hide, because she didn't want the pilot to see her. She didn't want panic or screaming or accusations. But she also knew that a crash meant danger. Someone might be injured. Her instincts pushed her to help. She stood up slowly, dust falling from her clothes. She hesitated for one more second, then took a deep breath and began walking toward the crash site. Each step shook the dusty ground. She tried to step lightly, but there was no such thing as light footsteps from someone her size. Ezra climbed out of the ship, coughing from the smoke. He waved the air in front of him and checked his side. His ribs hurt, but nothing felt broken. He inspected the damage on the engine. It was bad. He needed help, tools, and maybe even parts. He was in the middle of nowhere. He sighed heavily. This was going to be difficult. He didn't notice the shadow at first. It stretched across the metal hull slowly, wider and wider, until he finally turned around. What he saw made him freeze completely. She was massive, bigger than any alien he had met before. She stood tall and unsure, her huge frame slightly hunched as if trying to shrink herself. She did not move closer. She did not raise her arms. She simply stood several meters away, looking at him with glowing violet eyes that did not match her intimidating shape. Those eyes looked gentle, afraid, apologetic. Ezra's body reacted first with shock, his heart thudding hard. He had seen large species, but not like this. She looked strong enough to lift his entire ship. But she didn't threaten him. She didn't growl or shout. She actually looked like she was waiting for him to scream. Lyra Ven lifted one large hand slowly. showing her empty palm. Her voice came out soft, low, and careful. She had trained herself to speak quietly after years of being told she was too loud. "Are you injured?" Ezra blinked twice. He swallowed. Her voice didn't match her size at all. It was gentle. He relaxed slightly, still cautious but less frightened. "I'm okay," he replied. "The ship is not." Lyra Ven nodded. She took one careful step forward. Her foot made a dull thud against the ground. Ezra tensed again, and she stopped instantly, afraid of scaring him. "I can help," she said softly. If you want me to." Ezra wasn't sure what to think. She looked like she could twist metal with one hand, but she also looked like she expected him to reject her. He studied her face, trying to understand her emotions. She seemed nervous. "Not dangerous, nervous. You're not here to hurt me?" he asked honestly. Her eyes widened with surprise, then pain. She shook her head immediately. "No, I would never. I saw your crash. I only came to help." Ezra nodded slowly. His racing heartbeat settled. He gave a small smile, trying to show trust. "Okay," he said. "Help would be great." A gentle breath escaped her lips, like relief she had carried for a lifetime. She approached the ship carefully. Ezra watched in awe as she examined the damaged engine. Her fingers were large, strong, and steady. He expected someone that big to be rough, but she handled the metal with surprising care. She lifted the ship slightly from one side to check beneath it. Ezra's jaw dropped. She lifted the whole thing as if it weighed nothing. "You're strong," he said, unable to hide his amazement. She froze again, unsure if that was a compliment or an insult. She had heard the word used against her too many times. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "If it bothers you, I can stop." Ezra blinked again. He didn't understand why she apologized. No, he said, shaking his head. "I didn't mean it badly." "You're incredible. I've never seen someone lift a ship like that." Lyra Ven's expression changed slowly, like her mind couldn't process a compliment that wasn't meant as mockery. She lowered the ship gently and looked at him with confusion. "You don't think I look strange?" she asked. Ezra didn't answer immediately. He looked at her properly this time. Yes. She was huge. Yes. She was intimidating from afar, but up close, her eyes were warm, her movements careful, her voice humble. Her size didn't define her. He saw someone who felt like she did not belong. "You look like someone who helped me when she didn't have to," he said finally. "That's what I see." Her chest tightened. Her breath caught for a moment. No one had ever said that to her. Not once. Ezra stepped around the ship to show her the broken parts. She bent down beside him, lowering herself to the ground. She knew she took up too much space, so she folded her legs to look smaller. Ezra noticed she kept trying to hide parts of herself, as if ashamed of her own body. He didn't comment on it. He just spoke normally, explaining the damage. She listened closely. Then, after a moment, she spoke quietly again. "I know where to find scrap parts," she said. "Old machines are still in the valley. I can bring them." Ezra nodded. "That would help a lot." She stood up carefully. "I'll go. I won't be long." Ezra watched her walk away. She took long, powerful steps, but her body language stayed hesitant, almost fragile. He wondered how someone so strong could look so afraid of being seen. Lyra Ven walked deeper into the valley, her heart beating faster than usual. Not from fear this time, from something else. That human. He didn't yell. He didn't freeze. He didn't mock her. He looked at her like she was a person, like she mattered. It felt unreal. She wasn't used to kindness. She wasn't used to being looked at without disgust. She didn't know how to handle it. As she gathered metal parts, she replayed his words in her mind. "That's what I see." She had expected fear, but he saw something else. Something she didn't believe about herself. She felt something warm and unfamiliar slowly building inside her chest. She returned to the crash site carrying a pile of scrap metal easily in her arms. Ezra smiled when he saw her again, and something inside her softened like melting ice. She did not know it yet, but that small smile from a single human would begin to change everything she believed about herself. It was the first moment she realized she might not be a monster after all. Lyra then placed the scrap metal gently beside the damaged engine, trying not to make too much noise. Ezra stood beside the ship, wiping sweat and dust from his face. He had been trying to loosen a warped plate but didn't have the strength to bend it back into shape by himself. When he saw her return, he let out a small breath of relief. He didn't know why, but her presence made the lonely valley feel less empty. She knelt down beside the ship, lowering herself until she was eye level with the damaged section. Ezra watched closely as she examined the metal again. Her fingers traced the cracks with surprising delicacy. It still amazed him that someone with so much physical power could move like she was afraid to break the world. She handled everything like it was made of glass. "Can I bend this part back?" she asked softly. "It will help you fit the replacements." Ezra nodded. "Yeah, go ahead." She wrapped one massive hand around the bent panel and pushed slow, steady, controlled. The metal groaned, resisting at first, then finally eased back into its original shape. Ezra stared with open admiration. He knew she was strong, but he hadn't realized just how much control she had, not brute force precision, skill. "You're amazing," he said without thinking. Lyra then froze. She kept her head down, but her violet eyes flicked toward him in disbelief. "No," she whispered. "I'm just big." "That's not what I said," Ezra replied gently. "I said amazing." Her throat tightened again. Compliments weren't things she knew how to hold. They slipped through her fingers because she never believed they were real. But this human's voice didn't sound mocking. It didn't sound afraid. It sounded honest. She fixed the metal completely, then looked at him again. "You speak kindly," she murmured. "Most people don't." Ezra didn't understand why anyone wouldn't. She was helpful, gentle, cautious. Nothing about her felt dangerous. He shrugged lightly. "Well, I talk to people the way I want them to talk to me," he said. "Seems fair." Lyra Ven lowered her gaze. She wished more people thought like that. Ezra stepped closer to examine the adjustments she made. "This is perfect," he said. "Thank you." She nodded. But she looked away quickly, trying to hide the small expression forming on her face, something warm, something she was scared to let show. They worked together for a while. Ezra handled wiring and smaller tools. She handled heavy plates and mechanical adjustments. They made a good team. She noticed how focused he was when he worked, how he leaned close to the circuits with careful eyes. He noticed how she waited for instructions before touching anything, worried she'd ruin something by accident. But she never did. Every move she made was careful. At one point, Ezra needed a part from inside the cockpit. When he climbed the small ladder to reach it, he slipped slightly on a loose bolt. The ladder shook. He lost balance. Lyra Ven reacted instantly. Her huge hand shot out and steadied the entire ladder with ease. Ezra froze, gripping the steps tightly. When he looked down, she was holding the structure like it weighed nothing, her expression full of concern. "Are you okay?" she asked. Ezra nodded slowly. "Yeah, thank you." She kept her hand in place until he was safe on the ground again. When he stepped away from the ladder, he looked at her with an appreciative smile. "You have good reflexes," he said. Lyra Ven looked confused. "Reflexes? That quick reaction. I would have fallen without you." A small glow flickered in her eyes. She didn't often get told she did anything well. Being praised for something felt strange, but nice. They kept working until the sun began dipping behind the cliffs. Shadows stretched across the valley, long and cool. Ezra wiped his forehead again. "We're making good progress," he said. "Hopefully another day or two, and the ship will fly." Lyra Ven nodded. "I'm glad." Ezra glanced at her again. She still looked like she was trying to shrink herself, even though she couldn't. Her shoulders were slightly hunched. Her arms pulled close. She seemed afraid of taking up space. "Hey," he said softly. Can I ask something? She hesitated, then gave a small nod. Why do you look scared of being here? Lyraven blinked. She didn't expect the question. She looked away for a moment, gathering courage to speak. I am not scared of this place, she said. I am scared that I might scare you. Ezra raised an eyebrow. Why would you scare me? Lyraven curled her fingers slightly. Because of how I look. Ezra studied her face again. Yes. She was huge. But nothing about her felt frightening. She looked more like someone who had been wounded many times and expected to be wounded again. Has someone told you that? He asked quietly. Many, she answered. Since I was young. Ezra felt a small ache in his chest. That's not right. She didn't reply. She wasn't used to someone disagreeing with the insults she had heard all her life. Ezra took a step closer, just enough for his voice to be warm and steady. Lyraven, you're not scary. You're kind. Her breath caught again. She wanted to believe him, but the world had taught her otherwise. The kindness you see is not important to others, she said quietly. They only see my shape. They look at me and think I am a danger. Ezra shook his head. Then they're wrong. She looked up at him with wide eyes, as if his words were a fragile thing she didn't know how to hold. You really believe that? She asked. Yes. She didn't know how to answer. A soft silence settled between them, warm instead of awkward. As twilight deepened, Ezra's stomach growled. He laughed awkwardly, placing a hand over his chest. That's embarrassing, he said. I forgot to eat. Lyraven stood up slowly. There are berry vines near the ridge, she said. Safe to eat. I can get them. Ezra smiled. Only if you want to, she nodded. I want to help. He sat down beside the ship while she walked toward the ridge. Her long stride covered distance quickly. Ezra watched her silhouette as she moved across the valley. Even from far away, he could see she moved differently now. Less tense, less afraid. Maybe his words were helping her more than he realized. Lyraven found the vines easily. She picked a handful of berries and returned. But before she reached Ezra, she slowed down. She remembered something from earlier. How he didn't look at her with fear. That memory gave her a strange confidence. Not pride, just comfort. She walked up to him and offered the berries. Ezra thanked her and ate a few, then smiled because they were sweet. These are good, he said. You picked the best ones. Lyraven sat down on a piece of old machinery nearby, folding her legs neatly. She didn't want to sit too close and make him uncomfortable. But she stayed near enough to keep talking. Do all humans travel alone? She asked. Not all, Ezra replied. Some travel in groups. I just like my space, I guess. Lyraven nodded. I understand. Space is peaceful. Ezra laughed softly. For me, yes. But for you, I think you want space because others didn't treat you well. She looked down at the dust under her feet. Maybe. Ezra leaned forward slightly. Have you ever met a human before today? She shook her head. No. Then, we're even, he said. You're my first giant alien helper. Her lips curved very slightly, a shy smile that she quickly hid by turning away. Ezra kept talking to her, learning about her species, her valley, the abandoned mines. Slowly, she began to open up. She told him how she used to avoid crowded areas because children would cry when she passed. How adults whispered about her. How even among her people, she felt out of place. Ezra listened carefully, not interrupting. When she finished, he spoke with calm sincerity. You didn't deserve any of that, he said. People fear what they don't understand. The lival, seeing, calming matter. People fear what they don't understand. Lyraven didn't look at him for a long moment. Then she said something she had never said to anyone before. I don't want to be feared, she whispered. I want to be seen. Ezra's voice softened. I see you. She looked up sharply, breath catching again. Ezra didn't flinch. He didn't look away. He met her eyes with honesty. That simple moment, that simple gaze, felt more powerful to her than anything she had ever experienced. A gentle breeze moved across the valley. The stars began appearing overhead. Ezra leaned back against the ship, relaxing. You know, he said after a while, when my ship crashed, I thought I was going to be alone for days. Now you are not alone, Lyraven said quietly. No, Ezra agreed. I'm not. Another silence followed, but this one was peaceful. Eventually, Lyraven stood up again. It will be cold soon. I will bring wood for a fire. Ezra nodded gratefully. That would help. She walked off again, and Ezra watched her without fear this time, only admiration. She moved like someone who had spent years hiding her strength. But now, when she looked back over her shoulder to check on him, her expression carried a small spark of something new, hope. She returned with a pile of wood and set it down with care. Ezra started the fire, and the light created soft reflections on her violet eyes. She sat near him, still not too close, but closer than before. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was not unwanted. For the first time, someone saw something beautiful in her that had nothing to do with appearance. Ezra looked at her. She looked back. Neither said it aloud, but both felt it. Their meeting was not an accident. Something was forming, slow, warm, gentle, something that would change the way she saw herself forever. The night in the abandoned valley grew colder, but the small fire Ezra built kept a warm circle of light around them. Lyraven sat near the flames, not too close but not too far, her massive form glowing softly in the firelight. She kept glancing at Ezra, as if checking that he was truly comfortable with her presence. It still felt unreal to her that a human, the smallest species she had ever heard of, treated her with such calm trust. Ezra leaned back on a piece of broken metal, staring up at the sky. Your planet has clear stars, he said. Back home, lights from cities hide them. Lyraven followed his gaze. Stars make me feel less alone, she whispered. They do not judge. Ezra looked at her. Neither do I. She didn't reply, but the firelight revealed the way her shoulders relaxed just a little. It was the smallest change, but in her world, small changes were huge. Hours passed gently. Ezra talked about the planets he had visited, the odd food he had tried, the mistakes he made while learning to pilot. Lyraven listened like each story was a treasure. She rarely heard stories meant for her. No one shared their life with her before because no one ever stayed long enough. Ezra, however, talked to her as if she were an old friend. When he grew tired and closed his eyes, she shifted slightly. You need rest, she said. I will watch the fire. Ezra opened one eye and smiled. You sound like a guardian. She blinked. Guardian? Yes, he said. Someone who keeps others safe. Lyraven looked down at her hands. I do not think I am a guardian. You saved me twice today, Ezra replied. That's more than most guardians in stories. Lyraven lowered her eyes, overwhelmed by his words. She didn't understand why he kept praising her, but the warmth she felt inside her chest was new, soft, unfamiliar. She wanted more of it, but she also feared wanting it too much. Ezra eventually fell asleep near the fire. Lyraven stayed awake, keeping watch. Not because she thought danger was coming, but because she liked the responsibility. She liked knowing he trusted her enough to sleep while she was near. When dawn came, pale light washed over the valley. Ezra stirred awake, rubbing his eyes. You stayed awake all night? He asked. Yes, she said simply. You didn't have to. I know, she replied. I wanted to. Ezra gave a tired smile. Thank you. Lyraven stood up and stretched, her towering frame rising like a giant statue coming to life. She looked toward the old mining towers. We should continue repairs before the heat rises. Ezra nodded. They went back to work. Hours passed as they worked side by side. She lifted heavy plates, held beams steady, and fetched tools that Ezra could not reach, because they were wedged under collapsed machinery. Ezra repaired delicate wiring, reattached fuel lines, and restored damaged circuits. They spoke less today. Not because anything felt wrong, but because their teamwork had become natural, comfortable. They didn't need constant conversation to feel connected. At one point, Ezra climbed inside the engine compartment, and Lyra Ven handed tools through the opening. She crouched near the hull, her knees touching the dirt, her shadow falling over him protectively. Ezra looked out from inside the engine and laughed softly. You know, this is the safest I've ever felt. While fixing a ship, she tilted her head. Because I am watching? Exactly, he said. A soft glow returned to her violet eyes. She never imagined that someone would feel safe because of her. Her sighs, which always caused fear, was now something helpful, something comforting. It filled her chest with a strange warmth again, stronger than before. As the sun climbed higher, they decided to take a short break. Ezra leaned against a rusted support beam, drinking water from a small container. Lyra Ven sat nearby, her large hands resting gently on her lap. He looked at her again, studying her face with calm curiosity. "Can I ask something?" he said. She nodded. "Why do you think you're monstrous?" The question made her freeze. She looked down, avoiding his eyes. Her voice became very quiet. "Because that is what they see." "Who?" he asked. "Everyone," she said. "When I was young, my parents tried to keep me away from crowded places because I was different. Too big. Too strong. Children hid behind their mothers when I walked past. Adults whispered behind my back. Some said I looked like the creatures from old tales that ate livestock." She hesitated. "Some said worse." Ezra frowned. "That sounds awful." Lyra Ven nodded slowly. "I learned to stay alone. It hurts less to be alone than to be feared." Ezra took a slow breath, feeling a mix of sadness and anger for what she endured. He shook his head firmly. "They judged you because they couldn't understand you," he said. "That doesn't mean their words were true." Lyra Ven turned her head slightly, meeting his eyes for a brief moment. Her voice shook just enough to reveal years of pain buried beneath her calm. "But if so many say it, maybe it is true. Numbers don't make insults true," he said. "Kindness does. Actions do. And your actions today have shown nothing but kindness." She swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. No one had ever spoken to her like this, not once in her entire life. Ezra stepped closer, placing a hand gently on one of her fingers. His hand looked tiny compared to hers, but the gesture held a comfort that reached deep inside her heart. "You're not monstrous," he said softly. "You're remarkable." Her breath caught. She stared at him, unable to understand how someone so small could make her feel so seen. Before she could answer, the ground trembled slightly in the distance. They both turned their heads. A low, thundering noise echoed against the cliffs. Lyra Ven stood up instantly, alert. Ezra frowned. "What was that?" She listened carefully. "Machines. Old transport crawlers. They have not moved in years. Someone must be powering them." Ezra stepped beside her. "Is that good or bad?" "I do not know," she said. The noise grew louder. Dust rose from beyond the ridge. Lyra Ven narrowed her eyes, then suddenly stiffened. "They are from my colony," she said. "They are searchers. They look for intruders. Or dangerous animals." Ezra had a bad feeling. "If they see your size from far away, will they assume something wrong?" She lowered her head, sadness filling her voice. "Yes." Ezra stepped in front of her instinctively. "Then we'll explain." "You cannot," she whispered. "They do not listen to explanations when afraid." Ezra looked up at her. "So, what do we do?" Lyra Ven hesitated. "You should hide. They might think I am holding you captive." Ezra stared at her. "But you're not." "Fear does not care," she replied. He clenched his fists. "I'm not letting them treat you like that." She looked down at him, touched by his protectiveness but terrified for him. "If they think you defend me, they may take you away for questioning." Ezra stepped even closer. "I don't care." Lyra Ven's heart pounded. No one had ever stood up for her before. No one had shown loyalty. No one had risked anything for her. She lowered herself, looking at him directly. "Ezra, please hide. For me." He stared at her for a long moment. Her eyes glowed with fear. Not for herself, but for him. Finally, he nodded reluctantly. "Fine," he said, "but I won't go far." He hid behind one of the large broken machines nearby. Liraven moved to stand away from the ship, not wanting the searchers to think she damaged it. Moments later, 2 massive transport crawlers rolled into the valley, kicking up clouds of dust. Several armored aliens stepped out her people. They looked around the valley cautiously. One of them pointed at her. "There, the giant." "Step back from the wreckage." Liraven felt old wounds reopen. The fear in their voices was familiar, painfully familiar. She raised her hands slowly. "I am not harming anyone," she said. "Then why are you here?" Another shouted. "I helped the human pilot. His ship crashed." They exchanged looks. One laughed bitterly. "A human? You expect us to believe you helped instead of frightened him?" "Kroof." Ezra clenched his jaw from behind his hiding place. Liraven lowered her head. "It is the truth." Another searcher stepped closer. "Where is this human?" Ezra stepped out before she could answer. "Here." All the searchers spun toward him in shock. Ezra walked straight to Liraven's side, standing at her feet like a loyal friend. "She saved my life, twice. She repaired my ship. She protected me. She didn't harm me once." The searchers stared in disbelief. Ezra continued speaking firmly. "If you think she's dangerous, you're wrong. I wouldn't be alive right now without her." Silence filled the valley. Liraven stared at Ezra, stunned by his courage. The leader of the searchers finally spoke. "Is this true?" he asked her. Liraven didn't know how to answer. She simply looked at Ezra, the human who saw her differently from everyone else. Then she nodded softly. "Yes," she said. "It is true." After a long pause, the leader lowered his weapon. The others followed. Ezra let out a breath of relief. Liraven's shoulders relaxed for the first time since the crawlers arrived. One of the searchers stepped forward. "We misjudged," he said quietly. "We apologize." Liraven blinked. Apology was something she rarely heard. Ezra smiled up at her. She felt something warm bloom inside her chest again, something stronger than before, something that made her feel lighter. For the first time in her life, people saw her differently. For the first time, she believed she might deserve it. And none of it would have happened without the human who refused to hide behind fear. The searchers spent several minutes inspecting Ezra's damaged ship. They checked the engine, the wiring, the hull. Liraven stayed perfectly still while they worked, afraid that any movement from her might bring back their fear. Ezra stayed close to her, standing beside her foot like he had done before, showing that he trusted her more than anyone else in the valley. When the searchers found no sign of harm or sabotage, they stepped back. The leader gave a slow nod. "It appears the human speaks truth." Liraven felt her chest tighten. She had expected disbelief, judgment, maybe even threats. But not this. The leader looked at her again, his tone softer than before. "You did a good thing," he said, "helping someone in need." She didn't know how to respond. No one praised her actions before. Her throat felt tight, and her hands trembled slightly as she lowered them to her sides. Ezra looked up at her with a proud smile. She saw it and felt warmth bloom inside her again, so warm it almost hurt, because she didn't know how to hold something so kind. The searchers prepared to leave, starting up their transport crawlers. But before the leader stepped inside, he paused and said something unexpected. "You are welcome to return to the colony. Fear often blinds us. Maybe it is time we see you clearly." Liraven could not speak for a moment. No one had invited her anywhere for years. She gave a small nod, and the searchers finally drove away, leaving the valley quiet once more. Ezra let out a relieved breath. "That went better than I expected." Liraven looked down at him slowly. "You risked yourself," she said. "You could have stayed hidden." Ezra shrugged lightly. "I'm not the type to hide while someone good is misunderstood. I'm... She didn't know how to hold those words. They pressed into her heart, warm and gentle. Ezra brushed dust from his hands and examined the repaired engine again. With the parts we added yesterday, and what the searchers didn't break today, I think we can finish the ship by this evening. Liraven's eyes brightened. Truly? Yes, he said. Thanks to you. She lowered her gaze again. She didn't want to reveal how deeply his gratitude affected her. They returned to work. But something felt different now. Liraven no longer moved, like she was trying to hide from the world. Her posture was a little taller. Her steps a little steadier. Ezra noticed it immediately, and it made him smile. She still handled the metal panels carefully, still bent wires with precision, still adjusted heavy beams with gentle strength, but something about her felt lighter, as if the invisible chains she always carried had loosened. While Ezra reconnected a complex fuel regulator, she held the hull open for him. Her shadow fell over him protectively, and she watched his hands move with concentration. She found herself admiring how determined he looked, how fearless he was working under the ship without hesitation, trusting her to keep everything steady. When he finished tightening the last bolts, he slid out from beneath the hull and sat up with a satisfied sigh. I think that's it, he said. She set the hull down slowly. It is repaired? Almost, he said. We need to test it. Liraven stood up in a single fluid motion, her large figure rising tall. What do you need me to do? Ezra walked around the ship, checking cables. Hold the back end slightly. The thruster might shake when it powers on. She nodded and took her position. When Ezra activated the auxiliary power, the engine hummed. Deep vibrations moved through the ship, into the ground, and up her arms. But she held steady, her strength keeping the ship perfectly aligned. Smoke rose for a moment, then cleared. The hum grew smooth and even. Ezra's eyes widened. It's working. Liraven didn't move at first. She let the words sink in. Then she nodded slowly. Good. Ezra shut down the engine and ran his hand along the hull. I can fly again. He looked at her with a grateful smile. Because of you. Her heart twisted gently. She should feel proud. She should feel happy. But something else crept into her chest. A soft ache she didn't expect. If he could fly again, he could leave. She stepped back slowly. Ezra noticed the change in her expression. Are you okay? He asked. Liraven nodded, but her eyes lowered. Yes, it wasn't true. Ezra took a step closer. You can tell me if something's wrong, he said. She hesitated. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. You will leave soon. Ezra went quiet. He had known this moment would come, but he didn't think it would feel this heavy. I have to, he said softly. There are places I promised to be. I understand, she whispered. Travelers do not stay long. Ezra looked up at her face, her strong jaw, her deep eyes that looked softer now. He felt something tug inside him. Lyra, he said gently, do you want me to stay longer? Her chest tightened painfully. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to ask him not to go. But years of rejection had taught her one rule. Do not ask for things you are not meant to have. I want you to do what makes you free, she answered. Ezra stepped closer until he was right in front of her knee. That's not what I asked. She swallowed hard, her hands curled slightly against her legs. Finally, she whispered the truth she had never said to anyone. Yes, she said. I want you to stay. Ezra smiled softly. Then I'll stay a little longer. Her breath caught. You will? Of course, he said. You think I'd leave before seeing your home? Before meeting the colony you helped protect? Before spending more time with you? She stared at him, stunned. His words held no hesitation, no fear, no doubt. Ezra placed a hand gently on her leg, not frightened, not cautious, just warm and honest. I want to stay. Liraven didn't know how to handle the feeling swelling through her chest. It was warm and overwhelming and foreign. But it wasn't painful. It wasn't heavy. It was something beautiful. Ezra looked up at her again. But I want you to want something too. She tilted her head. What do you mean? I want you to choose where you want to be. Not where others pushed you. Not where you hid. Where you want. She considered his words. She thought of the colony she had avoided for years. She thought of the mountains, the cliffs, the empty valleys. She thought of the loneliness she once accepted as her fate. Then she looked at him. "I want to go home," she said slowly. "But not alone." Ezra smiled. "Then, let's go together." She didn't expect him to say that. Her heart beat faster. "You want to go with me?" she asked. "Yes," he said simply. Lyraven blinked several times. Tears, soft and shining, formed in her violet eyes. She turned slightly, wiping them quickly. She wasn't used to tears of joy. She didn't know how to show them without feeling embarrassed. Ezra noticed but pretended not to, giving her dignity. "It's okay," he said quietly. "You don't have to hide from me." She looked at him again, and something changed between them. Something deep, quiet, and powerful. By evening, they packed what little Ezra had brought from his ship. Lyraven carried his supplies easily in one hand while he walked beside her. They left the valley together, moving toward her colony. As they approached the settlement, people stopped and stared. But this time, their eyes didn't hold fear. They held surprise, curiosity, respect. Ezra walked confidently beside her, making it clear she wasn't alone. The leader of the searchers approached them, nodding politely. "You truly helped him," he said. Lyraven bowed her head slightly. "He sees me," she said softly. The leader looked at Ezra. "And what do you see?" Ezra smiled up at the towering woman beside him. "I see someone good, someone strong, someone beautiful inside." Lyraven froze, breath catching sharply. She had never heard the word beautiful directed at her before, not once in her entire life. Her eyes shimmered, and she looked away. Overwhelmed, Ezra stepped closer to her and gently touched her hand. "You don't have to shrink anymore," he whispered. "Not around me." She lowered herself slowly, bringing her face closer to his level. Her voice trembled. "Thank you, Ezra." The leader stepped back respectfully. "You are welcome here now," he said to her. Lyraven nodded. She felt something she never imagined she would feel again: belonging. As Ezra and Lyraven entered the colony together, children peeked out, curious but not afraid. Adults nodded politely. The atmosphere was different now. Gentler. More open. Ezra looked up at Lyraven again. "How do you feel?" She took a steady breath. "Like, I am finally seen." He smiled warmly. "Good. Because you deserve that." She lowered her hand slightly, and Ezra placed his palm gently against one of her fingers. They walked forward as the sun set behind them, casting a golden glow across the settlement. For the first time in her life, Lyraven didn't feel monstrous. She felt valued. She felt understood. She felt something she never believed she could feel. Beautiful because someone finally saw the beauty inside her, and she was learning to see it too.